set my mind in motion, as by the juice of saffron the thoughts acquire speed, the lips acquire stain, the stains become a warning, as by will alone I set my mind in motion. As by will alone I set my mind in motion, as by the juice of saffron the thoughts acquire speed, the lips acquire stain, the stains become a warning, as by will alone I set my mind in motion. Mr. Basic here. Why rack mount everything? Why rack mount anything? Why pressure a company to put out something rack mountable or with a rack mountable option? I will tell you that right now. There are three big reasons. One, first and foremost for me, is ergonomics. What makes it a necessity for me, not just something that I want to do, but something that I have to do, as opposed to the idea of collecting synthesizers that are like this together to make music and put them on a table. Why instead are they going to have to go on racks? First of all, my back. My shoulders. I've worked a lot of bad jobs for bad people and thrown out my back multiple times in my life. So I have, I wouldn't say limitations, but yeah, limitations. But actually, my back's pretty strong. I think actually the reality is I have about the same limitations as most people maybe at my age. And young people have to understand this, that whatever you're doing to your back right now, you may not feel it, but you'll feel it later if you're not careful. And so, about this thing that I see all over online, that I've seen this last 2 years looking at people playing hardware synthesizers, there's a problem. The biggest problem I see is tables full of synthesizers, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, except that there's something wrong with that in terms of ergonomics and how you are taking care of yourself and how you're staying healthy and keeping your back working okay. And if you are worried about that, or if you are only doing it to your limits, then the problem there is maybe that instead of having this problem you might think you have with gear acquisition syndrome, or with just whatever it is you think that's not allowing you to finish tracks, or to want to sit down and play your synthesizers even though you have them, or whether or that you don't want to make music, that you don't want to jam, or that when you do it, you can do it for 5 minutes and then you just don't want to do it anymore. Well, guess what? There's a reason that is really a reality for most people, and something that a lot of people don't even know about and won't know about and won't think about, because they're not seeing their reality as what's going on right now to your body. That's the physical reality of what's going on right now. That's your life. That's what's happening. And what you're doing has to do with whether or not you've eaten, whether or not you've slept, what you've eaten. What you're doing physically is number one, no matter what. And all these things that are going on in your head, yeah, sure, you can think of that as your life, but the reality is it's right now. And so, but there aren't problems with all controls being flat, right? And reaching to a point is okay, right? But if you have more synthesizers, you're going to want to do something about that. Faders are always okay. That's like keys. That's something that is not so bad that you can do when it's flat or flatter. Pitch mod wheels, that's okay. But where the problems come in is looking at screens, one, like this, going forward like this. Also, the knobs. The knobs are the big thing. Is turning knobs. I mean, you see how having your wrist like this, going like this, seeing the value of the knobs, and looking at the values of other knobs, looking at the values of any of this stuff, coming over here and looking at it, that's something that taxes you. And so think about if your goal is actually like to play a show or something like that, perform a show for an hour or more, maybe 2 hours, like to actually play for 2 hours, to be reaching at things and keeping your arms out like this for 2 hours. Imagine that. Or however long it takes for you to make a track, to sit down and want to work on your track. You want to work on your track for 2 hours? Same thing. So this is effortless. This remains effortless however long you want to do it, however long you want to have your hand on that filter cut off while you're playing a song. You can do it the whole song long, right? And worst case scenario, right? I can't reach things over here. I just pivot a little bit, and here we go. I just turn, and so you place them around yourself like that, and that's also why when people rack mount, when you've got your Eurorack stuff, when modular people do what they do and are really serious about it, they often have it at an angle up like this. That same reason. It's because I do this every day in and day out, and the reality is what a lot of people don't think about is if you do this a lot, you have to be able to find a way to physically do it, and it's not easy to sustain making patches. It's not easy to sustain if you're not thinking of that physical element. Okay, and that's number one, is ergonomics. Number two would be the aesthetics. Okay, I'm looking at the problem of having a table full of synthesizers, an actual table, just sitting there with synthesizers on it. Now, what I do advocate, I should have said, actually, is those keyboard stands, like 3-tier or whatever keyboard stands that allow you to keep things like this at an angle. Now something like this would be perfect that way, right? So, so there's that. But moving on to the aesthetics part of it. Now, cables. Like, this hides cables. If you rack mount things, it hides all the cables in back. Now, of course, when you get into modular, then you've got your cables for that, but then at least you're not doubling up on everything, so all anybody ever sees is cables if you're doing a video of something. Also, the main thing about showing other people this stuff, whether it's in a live performance or on video, cameras are already just going like this, Cameras are like people. They stand up, and we make them to stand up and be at angles like this. It's actually kind of hard to, get yourself a good rig for hovering above tables, and people seem to do that to like start out, even though it's a really hard thing to do. So if we had more of the things out there, were that people are buying, even cheaper things were to be at an angle, at a different angle where controls can be done like this, then that'll be a lot nicer. And of course, there are table or synthesizers with keyboards that do this right, like the Arturia Matrix Brute, for instance, has the controls where you need them, which is like this, and it has the keyboard like that, right? So it's perfect. MS-10, MS-20, the Korg MS-20, they re-released a mini version of that that you can buy, I think. So that's also a good option that way, and it's also a nice and vintage sort of thing, style-wise. And the Moog Sub 37 and Sub Fatty do the same thing, because when you're really worried about being serious about it and doing it right, whereas this instrument is meant for somebody who's gonna do it for hours, the controls are at least at a good angle to where you can turn knobs like this and not like this. There's a huge difference because like this is not something you can sustain. It's just not. And that's something that people don't talk about a lot. So I've got back to ergonomics, but really, yeah, that's all I need to say about aesthetics. You can see for yourself, I guess, the difference between, this and that. But I just want to talk about how much easier it is to have this going on for something that can be seen by others than a rig full of something like these, or even what Kebu does and has all the nice keyboard stands that have them at angles. Well, sure, he's got the ergonomics down, and yeah, and he does that on stage, and that's cool. And some people like to do that, but then you're still kind of looking at the backs of his instruments in a way. It's kind of, I don't know what to think about that. So there's that, and what was the third point? Hold on. Yeah, I guess my third point was just the organization of it all. Having things in racks pushes them all together. It helps with ergonomics, right? You don't have to reach as far for anything, but it also helps visually, and it helps with the aesthetic thing too, and you have more room to be there and maybe actually show off what you're doing, and have everybody see it, because not just because it's at this angle, but also because it all fits together. And even with modular, you can do your blank panels and fill up the space that's not already filled up. And yeah, that's kind of like my synthesizer dream of like what I want to be doing. Is I want to be doing something with something that makes sense and is organized, and that I can put together in one space, and not just have it be, well, just a mishmash of things with a bunch of noodle hair coming out the back of it just from my power and other connections. I mean, if you could see all that with the modular, I mean, with audio racks, then yeah, that wouldn't be very nice looking at all if people showed those off. But you do when you have tables full of synthesizers. And I just want everybody to stop and think, and maybe go down to whatever, yard sales or used furniture shops or whatever there is, and I don't know, think about building a little case by putting together a really simple wood box, or have somebody do it. Yeah, it's a really good idea, in my opinion. So that's all I have to say. I'll see you guys in the next video.